Alright, welcome back to Wrestling Retold and Relived with Richie Mars. I, of course, am your humble, gracious host, Richie Mars, and thank you for clicking on this episode of Retold and Relived. Again, you can always follow us on Instagram and Twitter and the TikTok at Retold Richie Mars. On TikTok, we have exclusive videos of myself on current and past thoughts on wrestling, and I'm growing a nice little niche following, as they say. But we're not here to talk about TikTok. We're here to talk about Orange Cassidy. Ooh, yes, I see your skin crawling with anticipation by the mere mentions of Orange Cassidy. For those of you unfamiliar on who Orange Cassidy is, he is a superstar in AEW, All Elite Wrestling, and has made a notable name on the independents as Fire Ant in Shakara, and of course the Orange Cassidy character we know and some love, some hate today. But what is the Orange Cassidy character? Well, I'm glad you asked, person I'm talking to. He is pretty much a very lazy, sloth-like wrestler. He doesn't want to wrestle. He's in a jean jacket, jeans, and he likes to put his hands in his pockets and is very unenthusiastic about wrestling in general. And that's pretty much the character. All this controversy for that character. But why is there controversy? Well, sit back and relax and let me tell you. So, Orange Cassidy made his AEW debut, I believe, in a casino battle royal, and he did some of his quote-unquote signature offense, where were these very weak kicks to the shins, and then he would step back, and he would psych himself up, and psyching himself up is just kind of stomping on the ground very, very lightly, and throwing a very weak-looking super kick, because he's a lazy boy. That's his character. He doesn't like wrestling. He just wants to... He's like, I guess I could wrestle. You know, it's like a real whatever type of deal. So much, in fact, that when he's being announced to the ring, it's weighing whatever from wherever Orange Cassidy. And that's the character. It's a very aloof kind of character who doesn't really care about wrestling that much. It's a very novelty type of character. He wrestles with sunglasses on. He'll put his hands in his pockets as he's throwing moves like Hurricane Ranas, super kicks, roll throughs with his hands still in his pockets. It's a very niche character. But people get up in arms about it because it's throwing in the face of wrestling. Nobody likes seeing that. It's making wrestling look like a circus show. Even though the history of wrestling, it did start as a circus act. Just a little history for everybody out there. But I understand where people are coming from when they say they don't like or don't get Orange Cassidy. It's a very... You need the right crowd to be in on the joke of Orange Cassidy. A guy who doesn't want to wrestle, but does it anyway. And he does it very well depending on your take on him. But what's my take on Orange Cassidy, since this is my podcast after all? I think he's fine. You know? I don't like a lot of things. I wouldn't even say a lot of things. I don't like certain things that he does. Like I remember there was a match with Pentagon weeks and weeks ago where they were doing the Canadian Destroyer spots where one would hit a Canadian Destroyer that would pop back up and the other one would hit the other one with a Canadian Destroyer. And it was a Canadian Destroyer Frenzy, which is basically a move where it's a flipping pile driver, which back when I was watching wrestling, only one guy did, and that was the finishing move. And that was Petey Williams. And even to this day, he says he regrets inventing the Canadian Destroyer because it's now a transitional spot, rather than a move that finishes a match. Now, I understand people's frustrations when they see that. And they're like, you see, he's ruining the business. He's killing the business. No, he's not. It's just when you see something like that, and you don't like it. It's kind of like being a big fan of Michelangelo's paintings, and then you see Picasso doing these crazy paintings over here, and you're like, he's not painting like Michelangelo. That doesn't make Picasso a terrible artist in comparison. Subjectively, in your opinion, he could be a terrible artist, but that doesn't mean that Picasso doesn't have his fans. Orange Cassidy has his fans. And I think a lot of people get upset with Orange Cassidy because not only is he quote unquote ruining the business for them, but he's an easy guy to point to when you watch AEW as almost like a scapegoat for the entirety of the AEW product. And when people say, oh, AEW has no storylines, they have no this, they have no that, you see, it's just indie garbage. Orange Cassidy is an easy guy to point to with all that. Not saying Orange Cassidy is indie garbage or anything, but Orange Cassidy's matches are pretty self-contained for the most part when he's not in a major storyline. But we'll get to his major storylines in a minute. And I think there are other people. I think Jim Cornette and his podcast partner calls him Pockets because he puts his hand in his pockets. Really genius. But it's just one of those things where you have a lot of seasoned veterans of the pro wrestling space, and they don't like, or they don't want to understand Orange Cassidy. So what do you do when something's different? You can do one of two ways. You can accept it, or you could bash it because it's not like how it was in the old days. But professional wrestling isn't black and white. Professional wrestling still has the core values as it did back in the day. There's a good guy, there's a bad guy, there's a story in there, there's a story in the match, and there's a story, hopefully, overall when it comes to these competitors on why they're facing off. Another big issue people have with Orange Cassidy is his body frame. He's about, it says his build weight is, on Wikipedia, 161 pounds. So he's not the most muscular guy. And when you're in the professional wrestling industry, some people like their wrestlers to look like wrestlers. And when you're not as massive as the people you're going against, it's about that suspension of disbelief. You can only suspend your disbelief so far. And for some people, that crosses a line. And I could see that. I could see how people would look at a skinnier superstar and not really take the match seriously because of the size difference. I mean, for a long period of time, Rey Mysterio was one of the most incredible athletes, and it took him a while for people to believe that he can actually be in the ring with these giants. I believe he was the giant killer at one point with Kevin Nash and Bam Bam Bigelow. And when you have stories like that, being the giant killer, it almost kind of tips on that point of being, all right, a little bit too silly to actually be believable, because some people like having their wrestling more believable, as a believable fight. But some people just like being entertained, and that's what Orange Cassidy brings to the AEW table, is entertainment, which is shocking that some people who are very pro WWE aren't pro entertainment with Orange Cassidy as a character. But I think I know why. And it does concern the fact where some people might not mind Orange Cassidy's spots, with the sunglasses, the jean jacket, the lazy thumbs up, the weak kicks, the hands in the pockets, all that kind of stuff. But when he's being booked so dominantly throughout his run, I think he's had over 100 wins. Am I correct on that? I'll double check that later. But you have all these dominant wins for a championship, the AEW International Championship, and he really made that championship his own as a title that didn't really mean much of anything because it's still such a brand new championship. And he made defense after defense in very good to great matches, in my opinion. And there was a story throughout all these matches. Maybe not all of them not every single match had a story to it, but the building story of Orange Cassidy is just burning himself out, just making defense after defense every week until it culminates in him finally losing that championship to Jon Moxley in the main event at All Out in Chicago. And that's what's pretty cool about the character, or very ironic rather, is that this guy who doesn't want to wrestle, who couldn't really care less about wrestling in storyline, is now finally caring for a championship that he helped put on the map. but I could see how the novelty could wear off when you're in a serious program, when you're trying to be a serious main eventer. And a lot of people don't see Orange Cassidy as a main eventer, and I can't fault them on that. That's a very opinion-based thing. I know people who say Seth Rollins isn't a main event caliber superstar, but he still continues to go out there and try to prove his doubters wrong. Same thing with Orange Cassidy. But something interesting happened with Orange Cassidy, and that his numbers when he's on Dynamite or Collision or Rampage and demos are really strong and really good. They're one of the highest in the company. So he is, to the AEW audience, a draw. And you have people in the crowd that are dressing up like him, doing the casual thumbs up. They're posing after the shows, and AEW's videos, majority of them, the top videos feature Orange Cassidy. So whether you like him or hate him, you can't deny the fact that for AEW, he is a major star, and he is a major star in that company. And some people will look at that and say, you see, that's what's wrong with the business today. And I can admit, with Orange Cassidy, if you threw him in a WWE ring, will his character or gimmick work as well? Yes, but there's an asterisk with that. Because with WWE, it's a different type of psychology. In-ring, out of the ring, everything. Like we discussed for our AEW vs. NXT retrospective episode a couple weeks back. WWE has a different type of psychology. If you take Cody Rhodes, for example, since he's the biggest and only name that we've seen from AEW jump to WWE, and we've seen his character develop. We got Jade Cargill, who's there, Brian Pillman Jr., who's Lexis King, who's there, but we haven't seen their characters as in-depth as Cody yet. Cody pretty much had the same presentation, same music, same everything when it came to his AEW character in WWE. The difference is he didn't have a lot of his extra AEW, for lack of a better term, baggage. He didn't have his giant Nightmare Family squad to accompany him in every match. He didn't have Brandy, didn't have Pharaoh, his dog, didn't have. He did have the Cody Vader for a while, but then the night after WrestleMania, his head kind of got stuck out, so they only used the Cody Vader on special occasions. But again, it's a different presentation, even though it's very similar. Even the music, when the crowd are singing Cody's song and they hit the whoa, that's more fan engagement than they ever had in AEW. And that's just a fact. So if Orange Cassidy, hypothetically, went to WWE, I'm sure a lot of people's minds just blew up just for the simple the mention of Orange Cassidy going to WWE. But I'm making a point. His gimmick could work, his character could work, but it would take a lot of WWE tooling in order to work in that environment. Even people within AEW were doubting Orange Cassidy's ability to carry a program or connect with the crowd or actually be taken seriously as a competitor. Chris Jericho being one of them. Chris Jericho didn't understand the Orange Cassidy character, and it wasn't until seeing it for himself in person and taking a couple matches in when Orange Cassidy was facing off against Pac, when Orange Cassidy was facing off against different opponents, and Chris Jericho took notice so much, in fact, that was Orange Cassidy's first major program within AEW. And just seeing them interact and bounce off each other, and everyone's like, oh, it's bringing Jericho down. No. It was elevating Orange Cassidy up to be with Chris Jericho, and Chris Jericho playing it straight with all of Orange Cassidy's antics only helped the story of Chris Jericho constantly being frustrated with Orange Cassidy and being annoyed with his presence. So, you're taking real life stuff and story and turning it into a storyline. Crazy concept, I know. And then it culminated in the Mimosa Mayhem match, with Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho was all about the bubbly, and Orange Cassidy, orange, mimosas, orange juice. It writes itself. Champagne orange juice writes itself. And then you have other stars like Sting, who's playfully joking around with Orange Cassidy at ringside, doing the kicks and even doing the weak version of the Sting chest bump, when he chests his, when he takes his fist and he bumps his chest a bunch of times. So Sting got it too, Sting was having fun. And that's what wrestling should be. It should be fun. But unfortunately, there are people who myself included at times, might take it a little bit too seriously. And Orange Cassidy is a character that you could plug and play into any aspect on the show. You want a serious, good 15-20 minute match, put Orange Cassidy in there. Not as serious as when they were doing the Canadian Destroyer spots, but it's an entertaining watch, and I could see how people like it at times. Again, sometimes the art isn't for me, but that doesn't discount other people's enjoyment of it. If you need a segment with just an aloof Orange Cassidy in the background being interviewed, you can have that too. And now we're seeing more stuff with him and Jon Moxley. And I know Jon Moxley has his detractors, but as a technical wrestler, he's pretty underrated in my opinion. Just watch his New Japan stuff. Do I think he's over-reliant on the blood? It's become a meme at this point? Sure. Of course he is. But again, it's the style he wants to work, so let him do it, Who am I to say? I'm not his boss. There's only one person who controls Jon Moxley, and that's Tony Khan, and I don't think he can control Jon Moxley. And the build-up to the Orange Cassidy-Jon Moxley match, which was pretty cool with Orange Cassidy finding along his journey as AEW International Champion that he actually does care for this championship, and for the first time in his professional wrestling career, he does care about winning or losing, even though he's tremendously beat up, and he wants to prove himself to arguably the ace of AEW, Jon Moxley, and finishing off the promo with "I'm Orange Cassidy and I don't have a catchphrase," which is a perfect way to loop back to all these wrestlers who have catchphrases, but Orange Cassidy just doesn't care to have one. Again, it's perfect for his character, and this is probably going to anger a lot of people, but I'm going to say it anyway. I am not comparing the two. I am just making an observation. Now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about Hulk Hogan for a minute. I could hear you with your pitchforks and torches already. But Hulk Hogan has, with his many, many, many flaws, Hulk Hogan has always had a tremendous pulse on his character. When he's in New Japan, he knew to be more technical. When he was in WWF, WWE, he knew what to bring to the table over there as the superhero. When he was at WCW, he knew how to play off the crowd who didn't like him at that period of time. With Orange Cassidy, he has a tremendous understanding of his own character. And I think that is what draws people to Orange Cassidy, much like a lot of people how they were drawn to Hulk Hogan, despite not only the physical acumen of Hulk Hogan, but you had the character that you could latch onto. The say your prayers, drink your milk, say your vitamins, all that kind of fun stuff. People gravitated towards that Hulk Hogan character because Hulk knew what his character could work in different environments. With Orange Cassidy, he knows the AEW audience. And we haven't seen much of Orange Cassidy in other promotions. We've seen him in the Independents and AEW, but AEWs and the Independents are kind of intertwined at this point when it comes to psychology. AEW is kind of like a mixing pot of all different styles. You have Lucha Libre, you have New Japan, you have British Strong Style. You have all these different styles that are coming into this one giant organization. But if you were to go to CMLL or AAA, or you go to New Japan and you stick Orange Cassidy in there, would he succeed in that environment? And that's more interesting to me to see Orange Cassidy outside the AEW independent bubble. I'd like to see him in those different territories to see how he adapts. And I have no doubt that he has that ability. It's just a matter of having the right canvas or the right platform to display his many talents. And I think it's a high possibility that we could see him in different promotions, depending on if AEW's partnerships with these different companies holds up. And that's the biggest thing with Orange Cassidy. He has a tremendous understanding of the AEW audience, which is why his character works so well. And he doesn't really need to do much, but he does a lot when it's necessary for the story of the match. Like the first match he had with Pac, where he was doing the rolling around the ring when Pac was setting up for the Black Arrow, I think he calls it. Yeah, I think it's a Black Arrow. It was Red Arrow, but now I think it's Black Arrow. And he would roll in the ring. And guess what? There was a spot in WWE that they did that many times, but people were criticizing it because it was Orange Cassidy doing it. If you got to criticize one, you got to criticize the other, because I know Breezango did it in Backlash in that great match against the Usos in 2017. I know Santino did it in NXT, and now all of you are saying, well, those guys were comedy characters. Again, it's a different type of psychology. You could be funny in AEW and still be treated as a top guy as long as the fans accept you there. And the fans have accepted Orange Cassidy as a top guy. Whether you agree with it or not, that's how the AEW audience views Orange Cassidy. Because not only is his character work over, but his in-ring style, even if you disagree with it, and I disagree with aspects of it too, are over with the audience. He gets a tremendous reaction every time he comes out. So, who are we to judge? You know, the proof is in the pudding right there. The viewership's up when he's there. Demos are up when he's there. So, people are drawn to the aura of Orange Cassidy. Even his detractors, like a Chris Jericho, accepted him. Top stars like Will Ospreay, Shibata, Sting, all these top names of different points of the wrestling business, different realms of the wrestling business, have gained respect for Orange Cassidy for working with him and seeing his performances. And I think they know a little bit more about wrestling than you and I do. Just throwing that out there. So, are we allowed to criticize Orange Cassidy? Of course we are. You can criticize anything you watch on TV, and if it's not for you, it's not for you. And if you listen to the show, I do criticize AEW a lot, but it's not at a place of malice, you know? It's a place of just asking questions. You know, I remember I asked what the point of Battle of the Belts were. Why aren't we promoting the AEW special Battle of the Belts? Because a week build for an hour TV, even though they're contractually obligated, why aren't we making that event feel more special? And what is the point of the Battle of the Belts special if every week on every show there's a championship match? It just doesn't really add up to me. What makes this show special? If you listen to our past episodes, you know Mr. Seth. Mr. Seth has a lot of criticism to the AEW product, and a lot of his points are valid. You know, and when we discuss off air about AEW's problems and on air, we pretty much, you know, I try to explain where I'm coming from and how I see things, and he explains things how he sees things, you know, but we never raise voices, we never get angry at each other because, you know, it's an opinion. And in anything in entertainment, you're allowed to have an opinion. And there are some opinions that don't really make sense, other opinions do. And some opinions you can just accept and move on. And that's what I look at Orange Cassidy on. When I saw that Canadian Destroyer spot with Penta, I was like, oh, that was stupid. And then I moved on. Didn't linger on it. There are some people who will hold on to it and use it against AEW's product, saying, you see, this is what's wrong with wrestling today. And you're like, I got proof. This is why AEW's doing so poorly. It's not a good argument. Actually have a well thought out criticism of AEW instead of pointing to this one spot. You can hate the spot all you want. But if you're just saying, oh, it's just no selling. Oh, it's this. It's a different type of psychology. And with AEW, since they've bled in so many different styles like Lucha Libre, New Japan, British Strong Style, American Indies, all of that, you have to look and you have to understand where this is kind of like the ultimate melting pot of wrestling styles, which is what AEW is. And some things you're not going to agree with. I know for me, with the whole super kick thing and nobody selling the super kick, that angers me. Yeah, you know what I mean? But it goes back to my artist analogy. You can be a fan of Michelangelo, Donatello, all these Renaissance people, and you can hate Picasso, you can hate all these modern day artists. Same thing with music. You could see like, oh, this music isn't what it is like it used to. Like, remember when dubstep was a thing? I'm not even sure if it's still a thing, but people like dubstep, people like club music. But a lot of people will listen to that and say that's trash, you know? And things that we liked when we were a kid, anything nostalgic. I'm very nostalgic for WWE in 2004, but a lot of people don't like that year because there were a lot of tripped up things that happened there, storyline wise. So it's okay to have a different opinion on wrestling. You don't need to be holier than thou saying, oh, my way's the best and that's all you could see. Even like this podcast right here, you could say, like, what you're saying is total gibberish, but that's fine. But at least it's my opinion. I'm not following what other people are parroting. I'm just saying how I feel when it comes to Orange Cassidy as a character. Do I like him? Yes. Do I think there are flaws with, like, some things of his presentation? Sure, to me, but again, to the AEW audience, they go crazy for it. And why would you go upstream against that? I know Triple H, he's a big person in NXT. When an act got popular, he even said, he's like, I don't understand it, but okay, you guys want it? Here you go. I remember there was a thing with Eric Bugenhyman, and there was an NXT match he was a part of. This was before he was Rick Boogs. But his character was so charismatic and electrifying that they put him out between NXT matches and tapings in order to engage more with the crowd because the crowd loved him so much. So it's about knowing your audience, and that's what Orange Cassidy knows. He knows the AEW audience, and he plays that character really well. So I'm not going to take anything away from that because he understands his audience. Isn't that what wrestling is about? You understand the audience of wrestling. But now with wrestling, now there's different subgenres of wrestling. You have WWE wrestling, you have AEW wrestling, you have Impact Wrestling, or now TNA wrestling. Then you have Lucha Libre, you have New Japan, you have British Strong Style. All these different styles. What one thing might work in one company might not work in another company. Like, we've seen many people make the jump to different companies, like when people were released from WWE and they're doing independence. The WWE style doesn't translate as well on the independents. Same thing with the independents going to WWE. Some people need to be decommissioned, if you will, for better or for worse, to learn the WWE style, to have a WWE style television match. And with Orange Cassidy, we know he's going to be very comfortable within AEW, but for me, there's going to be a what-if scenario if he could thrive in other companies, not just a WWE, but CMLL, a British strong style promotion, a New Japan promotion, to see if he can adapt to those types of environments. And I think he does have the ability to, just going based off his matches. He has a very well understanding of his own story and psychology overall. I don't think match by match he could probably sell a bit more. But again, that's a part of the character. He's a guy who was inspired by the Fast and the Furious movies with The Rock in them. You got to check out that interview if you can't. Just type in Orange Cassidy Fast and Furious. I think it's pretty entertaining part of his character of a guy who, again, doesn't care about wrestling, and now we're at a point with his character where he's beginning to care for this AEW International Championship. And that just brings up the prestige of the AEW International title. For these two people, Orange Cassidy and Jon Moxley, two of the AEW's most popular stars caring about this championship that before people weren't really caring about, because it's like, oh, it's another championship for AEW. But now you have the two top guys fighting for it. So it's pretty cool that they're cultivating this feud based around this championship that, quote unquote, nobody cares about. And now they're making people care about their program and this feud. So time will tell if the allure of Orange Cassidy will last. A lot of people are burned out by Orange Cassidy, and I could understand that. But now is the time to see if Orange Cassidy can evolve as a character. But again, only time will tell. But this has been this edition of Wrestling Retold and Relived with Richie Mars. I, of course, am Richie Mars. You could follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and the TikTok at Retold Richie Mars. And I'll see you guys again next week. TTFN, ta-ta for now.